So I have chosen a small-ish film called Sunshine on Leith. So this is a movie released in 2013 and directed by Peter Mullen. So Peter Mullen, you might have seen around in many different franchises. He's been in the Harry Potter films, he's been in Westworld, he's in Trainspotting and, various films. But he also is an actor turned director. So this is, I believe, at least his third film that he directed. And if this was, an Irish movie roundtable, I would choose one of his earlier films called The Magdalene Sisters. So set within 1960s Ireland, and covering like the period, an institution run by nuns, which, imprisoned women that are considered fallen. But this film is set within Scotland, of course, and Mamma Mia wasn't the first to do it, but I think that it feels like this is very much inspired by the success of Mamma Mia and, a very similar film, so a jukebox musical, but set, a lot of the stories are, constructed based around lyrics to the songs featured, and it includes the soundtrack of songs by the Proclaimers. So that's a Scottish band. Their most popular song that you might have heard of is called I'm Gonna Be 500 Miles. So it covers 3 storylines. And first of all, there's Rab and Jean. So both the parents, and they've been married for 25 years, coming towards their silver wedding anniversary. We learn that Rab cheated on Jean very early in the marriage, just maybe a year after they got married, and has a long lost daughter that he didn't know about until birth mother died. So that's the first storyline, and then the second, it covers their daughter Liz and her boyfriend Ali. So Liz wants to go away, travel the world, is looking into jobs within America, whereas Ali worked within the army, but after a horrific event that he witnessed, decides to quit, and he wants to get married to Liz. So that's the second storyline, and then the third would cover Davy, who is son to Rab and Jean. Goes in on a blind date with a girl called Yvonne, and then his story is like Ali. They both worked within the army, and after the event they witnessed, they want to leave, and it's just about him going on that path and finding love. So it's really a great uplifting musical, a lot of great musical numbers within that, but also a lot of serious, a mixture of comedy and drama, and a lot of the actors within the movie are maybe not A-list at the moment, but you might have seen them in a lot more big budget, more recognisable films or TV series. So especially George Mackay, who plays Davy, and you will have recently seen him in the movie 17. But certainly it's, it's a movie, not one that I've watched multiple times. I've watched it 3 times so far. First in 2014, recently for the podcast, and maybe somewhere in between that time. But certainly one that I would recommend. Great storylines, and also, of course, the music within it and what they do with it. I would certainly recommend. What are your guys' thoughts on the movie?
This was my first time watching it. I hadn't heard of it before, and I didn't actually realize it was a musical until I started watching it. Like, I watched the trailer, and like the scenes from the trailer just seemed like a normal narrative film. And then I convinced my partner that we should watch it because it looked really sweet. It's like a romantic movie. And then about 5 minutes in, the characters start singing, and my partner's like, she just turned to me and glared because she hates musicals. Or she doesn't hate them, but she just finds them really unrealistic, which is funny because she loves music. And she loves like musical biopics, but there's something about musicals where she just can't suspend her disbelief. Whereas I don't mind them. I quite like musicals, and I find they can have quite a broad range from like happy and funny to quite serious and dark, like Sweeney Todd. Les Mis is quite a serious film.
Yep.
But this is a very happy, sunny film. And I did just feel myself just feeling happy and taking joy in watching it. And I think my partner eventually got into the mood as well. It's a funny type of musical, though, as you say, Glenn. It's not a traditional musical where the musical pieces kind of come out of what is happening in the narrative. It's almost like done in reverse, where the music exists before the narrative, and the narrative basically functions as a kind of skeleton to hold the music in place. So the obvious one, like you mentioned Mamma Mia, that was a big one recently. I think it's a big thing on stage, like in the sort of 70s and 80s and 90s, and then more being adapted onto the screen with like Mamma Mia and Rock of Ages that came out a few years ago. Jersey Boys, I think, does a similar thing. We Will Rock You, things like that, where it just takes
until we decided to do the podcast, I didn't actually know how many there were, but on Wikipedia it lists movies all the way back to the 1930s for this type of musical.
Yeah. It seems to be either like a particular band, and they'll put together a narrative around it, or it'll be like a period or a genre of music where they sort of captures a mood in a particular place. It's a strange way to make a movie, but I think it works in this movie because it's just so fun. And I think the actors are actually the ones singing it, and I think they do quite a good job. So that works really well. And it just, the final sequence is so fun when they finally build up to 500 miles. Because I don't know much about the Proclaimers. Like, I don't dislike them, but I just haven't heard a lot of their songs. Although I recognized a few that I didn't actually realize they sung. But the exception is 500 miles. So I like how they finally build up to their biggest hit. What did you think of the movie, Jock?
I wasn't a fan of the movie, but I'm not a big fan of the Proclaimers, so that's probably a major factor in it. Other than that, a lot of the dialogue was pretty accurate for working class Scottish dialogue. There were a few bits of stupid lighting, like he was a Scientologist. I thought that meant he was into science, which was just incredibly stupid. I can't believe a medical professional would say that.
Yeah, it's very sort of silly and almost cartoonish at times. I feel like there's nothing realistic necessarily about the movie. It is very much operatic. But you're not a fan of the Proclaimers, Jock?
No, I'm not.
Oh, fair enough. If you're not a fan of the Proclaimers, I can't imagine you'd like this movie very much. One question I had was the introduction of the movie is set in Afghanistan with the two characters serving in war. And then they sort of come back, and it's referenced a little bit, like one of the characters might have shell shock, and then towards the end of the film, he kind of goes back to serve. But did you guys have any thoughts on why they had sort of references to a war during this otherwise kind of like happy musical melodrama?
I thought it would just fit with the storyline of that he wants to get married to Liz, she doesn't, and she wants to travel, and then early on we see that they leave the army and their job prospects aren't great, so they end up working in a call centre. Mm-hmm. So they both feel quite trapped that they've left that, and there's not great jobs waiting for them, so they do that. And throughout the movie that he's you see when he's interacting with his sister and his sister-in-law, he doesn't even have a place to live. He's living with his sister. So he's feeling like, there's nowhere for him. Mm-hmm. So I think that all builds to that storyline where eventually he does go back to the army.
Yeah, right. Like they have this fond connection to Edinburgh and family life, but it feels like a bit of a dead end. And that's something that seems to be a common theme throughout the film. Like the mum kind of looks back on once having been able to go off and travel the world, but decided to stay. And then the daughter sees that as a kind of cautionary tale where she doesn't want to settle down and live in Edinburgh. She wants to go off and explore the world and be free. So it's kind of that tension between the traditional domestic life and home, and then yearning for adventure. And maybe that's part of what the serving is for that character, being able to go off and have an adventure. And it sort of like works as a good way to map the the 500 Miles song, this idea that there's this great distance between these two characters, but there's still this kind of emotional connection between them, that they can still be in love despite wanting to travel and wanting their freedom.
And I think the story of sort of like outward-looking Scottish people is quite relatable to the Scottish nation as a whole. Also a strong martial tradition. Scotland is only the number 3 most in terms of ethnic Scots in the world, behind Canada and the United States.
Number 3 what, sorry?
In terms of ethnic Scots, Scotland is 3rd behind Canada and the United States.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that, the sort of the martial tradition, perhaps, of Scottish culture. And also this idea that maybe Scottish people don't, I don't know, romanticize their own home that much, or don't find their own home that interesting and want to go off and explore the world, which is obviously a common experience for a lot of countries, especially a lot of Commonwealth countries that are always looking to bigger places like America or big cities. Even just living out in the country, always look at the big cities as something to aspire to and something to go off and have an adventure in. It seemed like a lot of the songs also speak to the Scottish experience. Like there's that one interaction between Davy and Yvonne where it's a song where he's talking about like Scottish men see this through the foam of a glass, and Sunshine and Leith, obviously, referencing Edinburgh. I think the movie shows some like pub culture. There's several scenes in pubs, and it shows it as quite a lively, happy place where everyone's singing together, and also like a love of storytelling. Seems like a big part of the film. Anything else you guys wanted to say about the film?
No, I think that was the main thing. Go watch it.
Yeah, absolutely.